Good afternoon. It is Monday, February 28th. I'm Jeff Timmer, and you are watching Lunch with Lincoln. We'll grab a sandwich and listen to our conversation today. I can't believe it is the last day of February already. I mean, there's been an ass ton of crazy packed into these first 2 months. It feels like it's been a year already in 2022. Joining me today is former congressman, former syndicated radio host, former presidential candidate, Joe Walsh. Joe is the host of White Flag with Joe Walsh, a podcast that you must subscribe and listen to. Joe is one of the few people who will cuss as often as I do. Follow him on Twitter. Joe, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Jeff, it's great to be with you. I love the work that you and everybody at the Lincoln Project is doing. Keep it up.
Now, let me start with this question. You've been, a candidate, an elected official. You've been a public figure for, quite a while now, and you've probably found yourself giving, hundreds, if not thousands, of speeches and remarks and whatnot. Did you ever find yourself accidentally talking to Nazis?
Yes. That's so great because nobody's asked me that question. That's awesome. Yes. And I come from the Tea Party. I come from Trump world, spoke at CPAC a bunch, spoke in a number of audiences where there was an eclectic mix of people. And look, the right has always had nuts and the right has always danced with far-right characters like Nazis.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I was joking about Marjorie Taylor Greene and, her lame excuse that she didn't know she was at a white nationalist gathering when she was at the kind of as crazy as CPAC has gotten. She was at the crazier kind of shadow CPAC.
Yeah, and Jeff, she wasn't alone. Paul Gosar, again for the second time, a guy I got elected with in 2010, spoke. We're talking about a white supremacy group. Mm-hmm. But the sad, ugly, pathetic thing is Kevin McCarthy, the leader of the party, who will be Speaker of the House, won't say a damn thing.
No, I saw at CPAC clips of Don Jr. talking about how, the Putin invasion of Ukraine wouldn't be happening if his dad was still president because his dad had balls. And I thought the only balls Donald Trump has are Kevin McCarthy's.
Yeah. Well, no, so true, Jeff. And look, you and I can itemize how soft Trump was on Putin. Trump was Putin's puppet. But again, for America, the scary ass thing is Don Jr. says shit like that. Most Republican base voters believe it. They believe right now Biden is weak and Putin did what he did because Biden is weak and Trump is strong. They believe that shit.
Well, let's talk a little bit about CPAC, the conservative American Conservative Union PAC.
Conservative, yeah.
Well, that's what they call themselves. Holy shit, was it weird? And, you and I have both attended in the past. You've addressed the crowd. It's always been, kind of kooky. It was always kind of like a mix of people you see on cable news and then kind of Star Wars cantina folks. And it was just this, it used to be like the doughier and pimplier you were, the hotter the girl you were with at CPAC. It was really strange, to kind of see.
Yeah.
But now, it is just kind of turned into this dark circus freak show. It's kind of like when Scar and the hyenas take over the Pride Lands in Lion King. Yeah. And it's really gone into these dark, corners of what used to be the Republican Party, what used to be the conservative movement, where the things, and I'll call them people, I'll give them that, who used to hide in the rocks in the dark spaces have now felt emboldened to come out into the light and their gibberish, their hate, their nonsense. And that's really what we saw so much of this weekend. Let's hear your thoughts.
Hey, Jeff, CPAC is really the Republican base. It's always been the base. And the base has always been a little kooky. But before Trump, even though you rightly say there was some kookiness to it, it generally revolved around issues. And conservatives would go down there, even the kooky ones, and we'd speak about and debate issues. I say this often, Jeff, and you probably believe the same thing. I come from the base. The base is now completely radicalized. And what does that mean? That means they deny all truth. They've given up on democracy, and they want a fucking dictator to crush their opponents, their political opponents. And so you see now a really radicalized base every year since Trump down at CPAC, and it gets uglier and uglier.
Yeah, I mean, we saw poll numbers out this morning saying that among Republican voters, among those who voted for Trump in 2020, Vladimir Putin has a higher job approval than Joe Biden does. That's insane. And you can be political opponents. You can think that Joe Biden isn't implementing the right policies, that he's not even up to the job. You can think all of those things, but to say, Vladimir Putin's doing a better job and I like him more, that shows how far and how off the deep end this party has gone. And you're right, it is the base. It's the mainstream. It's no longer the fringe.
No, it's no longer fringe. Look, when I was there, Jeff, 10 years ago in Congress, and either myself or somebody else would say a crazy thing, that was fringe. Marjorie Taylor Greene is not fringe. She is mainstream base. And all you got to do is listen to, and I won't force you to do this, Jeff, but listen to Tucker Carlson every night. Nobody channels the base outside of Donald Trump better than Tucker Carlson does. And make no mistake, they are either siding with, sympathetic with, or defending a strongman, Putin.
Sure. And the reality of the matter is, regardless of how many seats the Republicans gain in Congress this fall, there are going to be far more Marjorie Taylor Greenes and Paul Gosars than there are people like Liz Cheney or Adam Kinzinger or Fred Upton or Joe Walsh's or Justin Amash's, people who were ideological conservatives, not these performative people who call themselves conservative these days.
Hey, Jeff, because you're in this every day like I am. This is so freaking hard for principled conservatives or moderates to wrap their arms around. There's no room. But I spoke at the Principles First Summit in DC this past weekend. Great group of people, but they're not the base, and they don't know where the base is. And there's no room in this party for me. There was no room in this party for my friend Adam Kinzinger. He knows that. He couldn't win a primary. I don't see how Liz Cheney wins a Republican primary. This is where the party is right now. And I think until principled Republicans or former Republicans accept that, we can't move on.
Yeah. And, we had Republican after Republican, speaker after speaker at CPAC suddenly talking tough about Putin and Ukraine, except for Trump. I mean, Trump was out there calling Putin a genius and saying he's really smart and everybody else is weak. But, in reality, all these Republicans are chicken shits who are just abjectly afraid of Donald Trump. I mean, none defended the United States from his attack. They don't today. They all cower in kind of servile supplicants to everything he does and says. Even the people, who know better, and we both know so many people who know all of this is wrong, but somehow they think that they can ride this out, that the fever is going to break. But their puffed up rhetorical defense of Ukraine is utterly and entirely hollow. I mean, every single one of them is to blame for the precarious position we find ourselves in domestically and internationally, and not one of them has any awareness of their own contribution to this situation.
Totally. And by the way, Jeff, you said something about 3 or 4 minutes ago that needs to be repeated, and every American should hear it. Marjorie Taylor Greene is an un-American nutbag, but there are going to be many more Marjorie Taylor Greenes in this next Congress. And I'd add one thing to that, Jeff. A lot of Marjorie Taylor Greenes are running for secretaries of state in state after state, overseeing our elections. You're going to have a lot of Marjorie Taylor Greenes and Lauren Boeberts overseeing in states how the votes are counted. That's scary.
It is, and you can look back at the conspiracy to overturn the 2020 election, and clearly that's what it is, or was, and continues to be. And what Donald Trump and the RNC and all of the forces in Trump world are focused on is getting the people and the pieces in place to achieve in 2024 what they lacked in 2020. The fact that they had these ass clowns trying to pull off the coup doesn't make it any less of a crime, and it doesn't make it any less dangerous. They've learned from their mistakes. They're concentrating on races, these down ballot races like Secretary of State, like Attorney General.
Yep.
Even Trump is personally getting involved in state legislative primaries between Republicans, picking and choosing people who voted, who support his big lie, who didn't support his big lie in states like Michigan or Georgia or Arizona or Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, so that he can seize control of these legislatures, of these governor's mansions, so that people are going to throw wrenches in the certification of the election. You know,
Yep.
January 6th was not an event. It was part of a process, and that's what we need to wake people up to.
Democrats, Jeff, are asleep at the switch. They don't understand what's going on at the state and local level. Donald Trump for 4 years was a would-be dictator. If he's reelected in 24, he will be a dictator. I say it, a bunch of people say it. If he's reelected, our democracy is screwed. And the other thing I'd add, Jeff, is I always go at Democrats and independents with this. If Trump runs, the nomination is his. Nobody will challenge him. Not DeSantis down in Florida. Nobody will challenge him. And Democrats keep telling me there's no way Donald Trump could get reelected again. That's bullshit. He lost by 45, 50,000 votes. He's only getting stronger, sadly. And the Democrats have their issues. There's easily Donald Trump could get reelected again. Right.
I think the biggest, I guess, threat that we face is that kind of apathy, that, oh, it can't happen, the disbelief. We've already seen it. All the, we saw it in 2016.
Yep.
By the time 2020 rolled around, with all of the political forces, with COVID, with the joblessness, with all of Trump's idiocy, with his recklessness and corruptness and stupidity and insanity, he still almost won that freaking election. Even though Biden had 8 million more votes, Trump, you're right, came within 45,000 votes in a few states of winning that election. And to think that it can't happen again is wrong.
You're right, Jeff. And again, at the conference, the summit, I spoke with a bunch of principled conservatives this weekend. There was another former Republican congresswoman who kept saying the fever is breaking. The fever is going to break. I was pulling my hair out. The fever ain't fucking breaking. This is reality. And look, I spend most of my week, Jeff, because I come from the mega base. I speak to these people every day. Every week, I'm able to convert a few of them. But this is the reality. This is the party. We now, and you guys at the Lincoln Project know this, the name of the game is just fucking outvote them. We have to outvote them. They're not going away.
Right. And, they're crazy in their enthusiasm. They don't get tired. It's like 24/7. They can keep it turned on. That's the danger that we saw in the Virginia and New Jersey races last year, the intensity, the enthusiasm of the Republican side. There was decent enthusiasm, by the Democrats, but they're kind of like in a 7 or 8 on the 10 scale.
Yeah.
The Republicans are at a 12. The fact
Jeff,
that
they'll take back the House, won't they?
Probably, but there's still so many things that could happen. And,
Okay.
we don't know how the international situation is going to affect things. We've
Yeah.
got the Supreme Court decision on Roe that could just upend everything if they're to overturn Roe or severely limit Roe. If the economy, the perception of the economy and joblessness improves, if COVID isn't a thing that we're worried about on Labor Day, there's so many things that could change where we are now. But if we're paying $4.50 a gallon for gas and we still have Russian troops all over Europe, they probably take it.
And again, for everybody listening and watching Jeff and I right now, they're the odds-on. Republicans are the odds-on favorite to take back the House and probably the Senate. Again, that should scare the piss out of all of us. And I don't know why everybody doesn't come out and vote this fall.
Right. And if it's not a fait accompli, and that's what I think the message that we need to send. The fact that they've got maybe a little tailwind doesn't mean that they can't be beaten. And that's what we have to focus on and get that message out there and remind people that it is about something bigger. It's amazing that we're watching President Zelensky in Ukraine and people in Ukraine who are very new to democracy, kind of reminding the world what democracy means. And hopefully that helps us in the United States remember what democracy means and how fragile it actually is.
So Jeff, I'm a dark Irishman. I generally am pessimistic about the American experiment holding on. The only thing that gives me hope is what you just said, that more and more Americans are finally waking up to how very precious democracy is. And that's going to motivate them to really get energized.
Yeah, but we are at a point where I listen to conversations among just non-political people. I hear people at the gas station, at a restaurant, watch my Facebook feed with people who don't live and breathe politics, and they really are willing to trade freedom for gas prices.
Yes,
a lot of them. And it's not to say I think there are more of us than there are of them, but it depends on who's willing to crawl across that glass in November to vote.
Jeff, that's it. Again, spot on. There are more of us who oppose Trump than support him. The odds are right now those who support him are more enthusiastic to come out and vote. And we got to flip that, and we got to change that. Because we are the majority in this country. Former Republicans, independents, and Democrats, if we all vote against it, they lose. But I'm worried that we're not all going to vote.
Sure. And when you look back at the coalition that came together in November of 2020 to vote for Joe Biden, those 81 million people, they made a good number of those people were former Republicans, were people who historically voted Republican. They might have voted Republican after they voted for Joe Biden. On that same ballot. But they voted for Joe Biden because they were tired of drinking from this deluge, this fire hose of insanity 24/7 from Donald Trump. They wanted it to go away. Well, here we are, 15 months later after the election. It's gotten worse. I mean, that torrent is flowing just as strong or stronger than it was when Trump was president. And it makes so many people on the kind of the coalition of the sane, it makes them tired, weary, apathetic, makes them want to give up. And apathy is the tool of the strong man. It's the tool of the autocrat.
Well, Jeff, this is hard. You guys like you and I are in this every day. And let's be honest, by the end of every week, I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted. If you're fighting every day against these folks and you're fighting for America, it's exhausting. But it needs to be done. And again, my warning is, if Donald Trump runs in 24, the nomination is his. And it's a 50-50 shot as to whether that guy can be reelected. And Jeff, part of this is on Biden. What you just said, most Americans would pay higher at the pump to make Russia, come to its knees. I wish Joe Biden could communicate that. And I know he's trying, but I think he needs to do a better job. And I think in the State of the Union, I hope he does. I think he's up to it. Communicating the sense of urgency here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm holding hope for is that throughout the last several years, going back to the field of 25 or 26 Democrats who ran for the nomination, Joe Biden has been underestimated throughout the last several years, but he's risen to the occasion when the occasion demands it. That's what this occasion needs. That's what democracy needs, is Joe Biden to one more time rise to that occasion, inspire people to vote for democracy, to defend democracy, to be willing to be part of something bigger than themselves and not just retreat to partisanship over country. And that's what we've really come down to.
And by the way, privately, Jeff, he's doing it. Joe Biden has been leading this unprecedented unified response to Putin's invasion. Privately, he's brought the world together. Trump, well, let's be real. Trump would have done the opposite. He'd be siding with Putin. But Biden deserves a lot of credit for what he's been doing behind the scenes.
No, definitely. And when you look at the way that the Putin apparently has miscalculated the resolve, the strength of the Western alliance, not just NATO, but where you get the Swiss and Sweden, countries that didn't take sides against Hitler, are suddenly taking sides against Putin. And, you come down to the fact, no one would have been a bigger coward, more destructive than Donald Trump. When you contrast him to Zelensky in Ukraine, out there on the streets in tactical gear, inspiring, leading his nation. Trump pissed himself and hid in a bunker because people gathered at Lafayette Square.
Trump's job for 4 years was to divide this country and weaken NATO and our alliances. That's what Putin wanted him to do, and to just sort of tee up this invasion. Well, a funny thing happened. Trump lost in 2020, and Biden has done the exact opposite. He's unified our alliances.
Sure. Well, and we've seen still the right, the outrage machine of the right, Tucker Carlson and others, lead this pro-Putin, anti-American charge. In fact, Lincoln Project put out an ad this weekend. Why don't we take a look at that right now and frame this a little better?
At long last, the glorious invasion of Ukraine begins. Soon, the motherland will take the wayward province into her firm embrace again. Field Marshal Putin offers cheers and many celebrations for American comrades who showed loyalty to Mother Russia. We have much gratitude and thanks for Fox News, most especially Comrade Tucker Carlson. For his loyalty, will receive highest Russian honor, the Order of Lenin. We thank Steve Bannon, admirer and student of Comrade Lenin, who led the Republicans to support of Comrade Putin's plans for Greater Russia. We thank GOP Comrade Senator Joshua Hawley, who blocked enemies of Russia that the warmonger Biden wished to appoint to his regime. Russia waits 40 years for American Republicans to throw away disgrace of Ronald Reagan. Republicans say they stand for America. Comrade Putin knows better.
That's great stuff, Jeff. That's great stuff. And you know why? It's great because there's a lot of truth into it. I left the Republican Party 2 years ago. And the reason I left was it's a cult and it's an authoritarian embracing cult. I think a lot of people don't understand this. Republican voters I talk to every day, they don't mind that Trump acted like a dictator. They wanted a dictator to do their bidding. I think that's why a lot of them, this authoritarian impulse, they support Putin.
Yeah, when you look at the right-wing media, I guess the power of that megaphone, it's used and utilized to sow division and discord that's every bit as powerful a weapon against against the West, against the United States, against Ukraine, as tanks are. And we're seeing it still every day. This country has been under attack. It doesn't feel like war because we're not having bombs explode anywhere. We're not having people shot. But what's been going on here since 2016 with a few $1 million on Facebook is look at the disruption and discord that it has created in the United States to create this point in time where Putin felt he was able to make this move that he's wanted to make for a long time, because he thought, in largely so, that there would be this political divide in the United States that would prevent too strong, too severe, too sustained of a response from the White House.
Jeff, Trump's job for Putin for 4 years was to divide this country and weaken our alliances. Look, I come from the right-wing media world. I was a right-wing, conservative talk radio host. The name of the game is to outrage and inflame your audience. I did a bit too much of that I'm not proud of. But that's what they do. They try to scare the living daylights out of their audience. And now they're doing it with this Russia thing.
Yeah, it's really something to behold. Folks of our generation who came of age during the end of the Cold War, during the Ronald Reagan standing up to Gorbachev, standing at the gates of the Berlin Wall and saying, tear down this wall, to see the capitulation, to see any equivocation from the Republican Party about which side we should be on in this conflict it's not just a head scratcher. It's the kind of thing that virtually every Republican who's come before these clowns that are there now would roll over in their graves. The ghost of John McCain would slap the living shit out of just about everybody in the Republican Party today. It's something to behold. You served, Joe, with many of these people who are still there. Who are some of the people who are some of the biggest disappointments, who you knew 10 years ago in Congress that were much different people than they are presenting themselves to be today?
I'll give you two, Jeff. Rand Paul, who I served with and really liked, and we were close. I never, ever would have figured, Jeff, that Rand Paul would get down on his knees and have anything to do with Donald Trump. Ron Johnson in the Senate, Wisconsin, good guy. He and I were close friends. I never figured he'd sell his soul and be a stupid Trumper. The final name I'll give you is Jeff Jordan. We were very close in the House. He privately couldn't stand Trump. We don't even talk anymore because, again, he sold his soul like they all did.
Yeah, that's been the hard part for people who've been around the party, been involved in politics, who know these people personally. I see so many people I know and knew and helped elect that are there because of the work I did in part over time. Yeah. And I see that the destruction that they're causing, not just who cares at this point? I don't care about the destruction to the Republican Party. It's the destruction to the concept of the American experiment, to the democracy itself. And it sounds hyperbolic every time I say it. People say, "Oh, you're going too far." Democracy hangs by a thread. We are never more. It's the old line, you're never more than an election away. And that is, if that isn't evident to most Americans after January 6th, 2021, it never will be. And we've got to keep sounding the alarm.
Hey, Jeff, it hangs by the thread, democracy does. And if we all don't wake up, the Republican Party will take back Congress this year. That can't happen.
So, I know that this is something that you talk about on your podcast. Why don't you tell again, people how to subscribe and how to find your podcast so that they can tune in and listen to you and your colorful analysis and insightful analysis.
Thanks, Jeff. And again, we've got subscriptions coming right now. Just go to wherever you listen to podcasts and you can listen to it. White Flag with Joe Walsh every week. Jeff, I played a role in helping to divide this country. What I'm trying to do with White Flag is heal the divide. I sit down every week with people who disagree with me, and we have respectful dialogue.
That's amazing. I have a podcast called A Republic If You Can Keep It that
Love
I
it.
do. I co-host with the former chairman of the Michigan Democratic Party. I ran the Republican Party. He ran the
Fantastic.
Democratic Party, and we do the same thing.
Fantastic.
We were opponents, but not enemies.
And great for you, Jeff. That's awesome.
So Joe Walsh, thank you for joining us. This has been a fascinating, fascinating discussion. Thanks for all you do. Thanks for your voice. Keep it up. And let's cuss on Twitter.
Yes. Thank you, Jeff. Enjoyed it.
All right, folks. You can tune in on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday in the evenings to see Lincoln Project TV shows, and tune in again on Friday at noon to see the next Lunch with Lincoln. Joe Walsh, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Jeff.